as with everything else in Azure, there is a REST API for interacting with your blob storage. In fact, it's a pretty straightforward REST API. And all of your activities, your CRUD activities, are available through the REST API, and it's secured, and you can either use a key-based authentication or you can use a shared access signature, which is my preferred method if possible. All right, and as with the table storage that we've talked about previously, when we are looking at the REST API for blob storage, it starts with a base URL. All right, and so we've got the base URL, which is your account.blob.core.windows.net, right, as opposed to table storage, which was account.table.core.windows.net. Then you have the container in which you are placing your blobs, because remember the architecture is account and then container and then blob, and then the actual blob reference itself, the file name. Very simple. Now, what are you going to do with that? Well, if it's a simple GET, and it's just going to be a request, and that could potentially be the only thing you need in the request. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Right? With other operations, and oftentimes with GET operations, okay, then you need to have some kind of security, which again we'll talk about. But as you can see, you also have post, put, and delete available on that same endpoint. So I can post a new blob that way through the REST API. Of course, the file would have to be in the payload. It would have to be a MIME type payload if you're familiar with that. Okay. Remember also, the REST API exists, but you also have the SDK built on top of that, the object library built on top of that for a variety of platforms. I've done it in Python even, for example. All right. Now, that's how you access the blobs, but you also have access to the container as well. There's actually, and it's unfortunate, I should have done this a little better. There is a query string parameter res type container. So if you wanted to get back, for example, all of the items in a container, instead of specifying the specific blob, you could specify the container itself, and then you use res type equals container to tell the Azure environment that you're looking to retrieve information on the container itself. And so you have the ability to interact with the container similar to the way you interact with a blob, except you need to use that res type equals container. Okay, now as I mentioned, you do often need to authenticate with your activities, and that's always going to be the case for anything other than a GET. Okay, you may or may not need to authenticate with a GET. You can do that through key-based authentication, which is pretty complex, or you can do that through a shared access signature. Okay? And so the shared access signature is going to be a very powerful capability for working with blobs. And let's talk in a moment a little more about the different levels of permission and the way that we can access. Keep talking about this. Well, let's actually get into that.